I've always believed that karma is a powerful force. It's the invisible hand of justice that eventually puts everything right. But some people need a little nudge, a little push to get the wheels turning. This is a story about that nudge. My name is Evelyn, and I'm a senior graphic designer at a large tech company. And my story is about a man named Mark, who thought he was smarter than everyone else. He was a new hire, a creative lead, and from the moment he walked into the office, he was a walking storm of misplaced confidence and bad ideas. He arrived in a tailored suit on a Tuesday, carrying a large leather briefcase, and his first words to the team were, "I'm here to streamline the creative process and elevate our brand." The executives, who knew nothing about design, immediately ate him up. They saw a disruptor, a visionary. I saw a man who knew how to talk but not how to do the actual work. He was the type of person who would say, "I've been thinking outside the box," and then present a design that was a blatant ripoff of a competitor's. He talked a big game, and the executives believed every word. My job was to make Mark's bad ideas look good. He would bring me a wireframe that looked like it was drawn in crayon, and it was my job to turn it into a sleek, professional layout. He'd then present it as his own without ever mentioning my name. The first time it happened, I brushed it off. I figured he was new, maybe just a little insecure. But it became a pattern. A week later, he presented a new website layout for a client, taking all the credit for my work. I was in the meeting, watching as he held up the mock-ups I had spent 3 late nights perfecting. He didn't even make eye contact with me. My name, the countless hours I had poured into every detail, every pixel, were all erased from the narrative. He was the showman and I was the ghost in the machine. He had a way of subtly undermining me in meetings. If I spoke, he'd lean forward and say, "That's an interesting thought, Evelyn," as if he were a kindly teacher listening to a student. His tone was always condescending, but he never directly challenged me. The worst part was, no one else seemed to notice. The executives loved him. He was charming, and he was good at presenting his ideas, which of course were my designs. But that wasn't the worst of it. Mark wasn't just taking credit for my work. He was actively manipulating everyone around him, including me. He would drop little comments here and there, subtle jabs designed to undermine my confidence, to make me feel small. "Evelyn, it's cute that you're so passionate about your designs," he'd say, a smirk on his face. But passion doesn't always translate into quality. I began to doubt myself, my skills, my worth. His ability to turn the entire office against me, without anyone even realizing what was happening, made my blood boil. But that was his mistake. He thought he could break me. He thought I would crumble under the weight of his arrogance. But what he didn't understand was that the anger was building inside of me like a slow-burning fuse. It was only a matter of time before it ignited. One day, I'd had enough. I was working on a major rebrand for one of our biggest clients, and I had a breakthrough. I created a new design language, a new color palette, a new logo. It was fresh, modern, and perfect. I was so excited, I showed Mark the initial mock-ups. He looked at them, nodded, and said, "It's a good start, but I think we can do better." He took my work, made a few minor tweaks to the font, and presented it as his own. He got a standing ovation from the executives. I walked back to my desk, and for the first time in my career, I felt a deep, burning sense of injustice. The feeling was so intense, it was almost physical. He hadn't just stolen my work. He had stolen my passion. I went home that night, and I couldn't sleep. The anger was a fire in my gut. I knew I couldn't go to HR. They would see me as a bitter, jealous coworker. I had to handle this myself. I had to get revenge. But not with anger. With subtlety. I had to get revenge in a way that he would never see coming. My plan began with a simple observation. Mark was a showman, not a craftsman. He knew how to talk, but he didn't know how to do the actual work. He was all flash and no substance. And that's where his weakness lay. I knew how to create beautiful designs, He only knew how to take credit for them. I decided to give him something to take credit for, but I also decided to make sure that the credit he took would lead to his own demise. My revenge wasn't about getting him fired. It was about making him a victim of his own game. I started a new side project. It was a new, cutting-edge design for a mobile app. It was beautiful, it was innovative, and I knew it would impress the executives. But it was a Trojan horse. I had built a subtle, imperceptible flaw into the designs. A time bomb, a single line of code that would make the design appear flawless on a large screen but fall apart on a mobile one. The spacing was off, the fonts were distorted, and the colors were wrong. It was a trap for a man who only cared about the big picture. A trap for a man who didn't care about the details. A few days later, I leaked the project to Mark. In a casual conversation by the coffee machine, I said, "I'm working on a personal project, a new app design. I'm struggling with a few parts of it and needed a fresh pair of eyes." He immediately took the bait. "Evelyn," he said with that condescending tone, "I'm a creative lead. I'm here to help you. Send me what you have. I'll take a look and give you some pointers." I sent him the design files. He looked at them, nodded his head, and said, "I think you're on to something here, but it needs a little polish." He then sent an email to the team CCing the executives. "I've been collaborating with Evelyn on a new app design. It has some real potential. I'll be presenting the refined version to the client next week." The arrogance was breathtaking. He had taken my work and put his name on it. Presentation day arrived, and the air was thick with tension. He stood in front of the board, confidently showing my flawless design on the large screen, a projector showcasing its beauty. But a board member asked to see it on their phone, and the presentation fell apart. The beautiful design became a jumbled mess of text and graphics. Mark, flustered and confused, tried to blame the projector. He said, "It must be a technical glitch. The design is perfect on my screen." But the client wasn't stupid. They knew something was wrong. They left the meeting confused and disappointed. The next day, Mark stormed into my office. "What did you do?" he hissed, his face red with rage. "You sabotaged me. My presentation was a disaster." I just looked at him, my face a mask of feigned innocence. "I don't know what you're talking about, Mark. I gave you the files. They worked on my screen." He had no proof. He had no way of knowing that I had deliberately engineered the designs to fail on a mobile device. He was a victim of his own arrogance. He had been so sure of himself, so confident in his ability to take credit for my work, that he hadn't even bothered to check the files on his own. He had just assumed they were perfect. He tried to go to HR to accuse me of sabotage, but he had no proof. He had taken my work, and he had presented it as his own. The email he had sent to the executives taking credit for my work was now his undoing. The walls started to close in on him. The once invincible Mark, who had strutted around the office with an air of superiority, was now a cornered animal. He was no longer the charismatic leader, but a man trapped in his own web of lies. No one in the office trusted him anymore. The executives, who had once hailed him as a creative genius, began to ask questions. They scrutinized his work with suspicion. The very qualities that had once made him irresistible to them, his showmanship, his slick presentations, his ability to charm, now made him look increasingly hollow. Then came the final blow. Client, furious over the failed app presentation, pulled the plug on the project entirely. And when they demanded an explanation from our company, Mark was thrown under the bus. The executives, eager to shift blame, made it clear that Mark had been solely responsible for the disastrous presentation. The once confident creative lead was suddenly irrelevant. His work was a joke. He had become the embodiment of failure in the eyes of the entire company. I didn't celebrate his downfall, but I didn't feel sorry for him either. Mark had been a predator, and I was just the hand that made sure he stepped into his own trap. This is the end of the story, not a triumph. It's a reminder. Revenge isn't about destroying someone. It's about revealing them. It's about using their own weapons against them. He thought he was the architect of my demise. He was just the first tool. Thank you, and let me know in comments how you like the story. Which part was the most interesting and what kind of revenge stories you like? Subscribe for weekly interesting revenge stories.